I had $12 in my bank account. My rent was 5 days late, and my landlord had taped a final notice to my door that morning. I was 23. The interest on my degree was growing faster than I could pay it off, and I was stuck working a temp job. I spent my lunch break sitting in my car, not eating, just calculating how many miles I could drive before I ran out of gas. That's how it started. I was in the office kitchen, staring at a vending machine I couldn't afford to use, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. A man in a gray suit walked in. I knew he was upper management, someone important, but I didn't know his name yet. He saw me crying. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just walked over, pulled a thick envelope out of his inside pocket, and slid it onto the table next to me. "Fix whatever is worrying you," he said. His voice was calm and low. "You're too young to look that tired." Inside the envelope was $500 in cash. I tried to give it back, but he refused. He told me to consider it an advance on the bonus I was going to earn. A week later, he pulled some strings and got me hired full-time with a salary that was double what I was making. His name was Arthur, and for the first 6 months, I thought he was the kindest person I had ever met. He became my mentor. Because he was so much older, in his late 50s, I looked up to him like a father figure. He was rich, really rich. His family came from old money, and he treated the job like a hobby. He taught me how to handle difficult clients and how to dress for board meetings. He took me out to expensive lunches where we talked about my career goals. I felt safe. I felt like someone finally had my back. But I was wrong. He didn't cross the line all at once. He just kept nudging it forward, inch by inch, until I had no personal space left. It started with him needing to know where I was. If I went to the bathroom, he would be standing by the copier when I got back. "You were gone a long time," he'd say. He'd smile, but his eyes would scan my face. "Everything okay?" I started finding things on my desk. It wasn't just lunch anymore. He bought me a winter coat because he said mine looked cheap. He bought me a new phone because he didn't like that my old one had a cracked screen. I tried to say no, but he would just leave them on my desk and walk away. One afternoon, he called me into his office. He had my personnel file open on his desk. "I see you live on 4th Street, he said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the paper. "That's not a safe area for a girl living alone. I have a rental property in the Heights. It's empty. You should move there. Rent-free." "I'm fine where I am, Arthur," I said. Every instinct I had started screaming at me to run. He looked up. His face went flat. "I'm trying to help you, Maya. You shouldn't be ungrateful." That was the first time I felt scared of him. I started pulling away. I stopped going to lunch with him. I kept my office door closed. But that just made him try harder. He started waiting for me in the parking lot every single day. He'd stand by my car leaning against the driver's door so I couldn't get in without touching him. "Why are you avoiding me?" he asked one evening. "The parking garage was empty. I'm just busy with work," I said, gripping my keys. "I made you," he said. He stepped closer. "You were nothing before I helped you. You owe me." I went to HR the next day. I told them everything. I told them about the money, the gifts, the way he waited for me. The HR director looked uncomfortable. She told me that Arthur was a pillar of the company and that his family practically built the building we were sitting in. She said I was probably misinterpreting his kindness because of the age gap. "He's just lonely," she said. "Don't make a scene. It won't end well for you." So I quit. I didn't have a backup plan. I just couldn't breathe in that building anymore. I packed my things and left that afternoon. I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it. 2 weeks later, I was washing dishes in my kitchen when I saw a flash of silver outside. I looked out the window. Arthur's luxury sedan was parked directly in front of my house. He wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting there. I called the police. They came, talked to him, and then came to my door. The officer looked annoyed. He says he's just resting, ma'am. He's not on your property. He's on the public street. We can't arrest a guy for sitting in his car. He's stalking me. I told the officer he was my boss. Please help me. Well, if he comes onto your property, call us, the officer said. Arthur sat there for 3 more hours. Then he drove away. He came back the next night and the night after that. Sometimes he would stand on the sidewalk and just look at my front door. He never knocked, he never yelled, he just stood there like a statue. I stopped sleeping. I pushed my dresser in front of my bedroom door every night. Then came the night it happened. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was raining hard. I was awake, sitting in my living room with all the lights off, peeking through the curtains. His car wasn't there. I thought maybe he had finally given up. I went to the kitchen to get water. I didn't turn on the light. As I was filling my glass, I heard a sound that scared me. It came from the laundry room door, the one that leads to the backyard. I put the glass down on the counter slowly. I listened. I heard the soft squeak of a hinge. Someone was inside. I didn't scream. I didn't run out the front door because I was afraid he was waiting for me there. I dropped to the floor and crawled. I crawled behind the kitchen island and squeezed myself into the tiny gap between the refrigerator and the wall. It was tight and dusty. I pulled my knees to my chest and held my breath. I heard wet shoes on the linoleum. He was walking slowly. He wasn't rushing. He was humming a tune, a low, quiet hum that vibrated through the quiet house. He walked into the living room. Maya? It was Arthur. His voice sounded cheerful, like we were at an office party. I know you're up, he said. I saw the light in the kitchen. I pressed my hand over my mouth. I had my phone in my pocket. I pulled it out and dialed 911. I couldn't speak, so I just tapped the screen 3 times and left the line open. I heard him opening doors. He went into the guest room, then the bathroom, then my bedroom. You're making this difficult, he yelled from the hallway. He sounded angry now. I heard the sound of wood splintering. He had kicked my bedroom door. He was coming back toward the kitchen. I saw his shadow stretch across the floor in front of the fridge. He was standing 5 feet away from me. He stopped humming. He stood perfectly still, listening. I closed my eyes. I knew he was going to look behind the fridge. I braced myself to fight. I didn't hear sirens. I just saw the kitchen suddenly turn blue, then red, then blue again. The police killed the sirens a block away so he wouldn't hear them coming. Arthur turned around. He looked out the window. He didn't run. He just straightened his tie. The back door burst open. Police! Show me your hands! I stayed hidden. I heard shouting, a struggle, and then the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor. I got him! He's cuffed! I crawled out from behind the fridge. My heart was beating fast. A female officer saw me and ran over. It's okay, she said. We got him. They were walking Arthur out the back door. He looked back at me. He didn't look crazy. He looked disappointed, like I had ruined a surprise party. Another officer was putting on gloves. He was standing near the sink, looking at something on the floor that Arthur had dropped. It was a black duffel bag. What's in there? I asked. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The officer unzipped the bag just a few inches. He shone his flashlight inside. He froze. He shook his head. Don't look at it, he told me. What is it? I stepped forward. Is it a gun? No, the officer said. He turned the bag so I couldn't see, but he wasn't fast enough. I saw a coil of heavy rope, a roll of duct tape, and a box of clear industrial trash bags. He hadn't come to talk. He had come to clean up. Arthur went to prison for burglary and stalking, but his family's lawyers got him a lighter sentence. I never saw him again. I've worked in customer service long enough to know how to handle screaming customers. But I wasn't ready for the person standing behind the counter with me. I had been with Starbucks for about 1.5 years. I liked the job, I was good at it, but I got promoted to shift supervisor. Because of the promotion, I had to transfer to a different store in the district. I was actually excited about it. On my first day, I walked in for orientation. The store manager was giving me the tour, introducing me to the team. That's when I met Maggie. The manager introduced her as if she were a celebrity. She said, "And this is Maggie. She's our best barista. She absolutely owns the morning rush." I smiled and reached out my hand to introduce myself. "Hey, I'm looking forward to working with you." Maggie didn't even look at my hand. She just made this low grunt noise, turned her back to me, and walked away. I stood there with my hand out. The manager just laughed it off and said, "Oh, she's just focused. You'll see." I thought, okay, maybe she's just having a rough day. We all have them. But then I realized this wasn't just a bad mood. It was personal. This job requires constant communication. You have to call out drinks, coordinate breaks, and let people know when you're behind. But Maggie refused to make eye contact with me. If I asked her to pass a carton of milk, she would act like I wasn't there. If I told her an order was changed, she would ignore me and make it wrong on purpose. It was creating a mess. Customers were getting angry because their orders were wrong or unfilled, and I was the one having to apologize. One afternoon, after a particularly bad shift where she had ignored me for 4 hours straight, I figured if I broke the ice, maybe she would finally chill out. I waited until we were clocking out. I caught her by the back door and said, "Hey Maggie, look, I don't know if I did something to offend you, but I really want us to get along. I'm sorry if I stepped on your toes." She stopped. She slowly turned her head toward me. Her eyes were wide, way too wide. Suddenly, she opened her mouth and let out this scream. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was pure rage. She screamed it right in my face, then shoved the heavy metal door open and stormed out into the parking lot. I stood there, my hand hovering over the time clock, completely confused. I asked another coworker the next day, "What is Maggie's deal?" The coworker looked around to make sure no one was listening and whispered, "The manager treats her like a daughter. It's total favoritism. Maggie thinks she runs this place. She wanted that supervisor spot you got. Since she didn't get it, she hates you." At first I had some empathy. It sucks to be passed over for a promotion, but over the next year, that empathy completely vanished. Maggie wasn't just rude, she was aggressive. She claimed she owned the morning shift, but what that really meant was that she screamed at customers. I'm not exaggerating. If a customer took too long to order, she would snap at them. If they asked for a modification, she'd roll her eyes and slam the cup down. Later, she would laugh and tell us, "Oh, they like being talked to that way. They know I'm kidding." They didn't know she was kidding. People would come up to me at the handoff plane and whisper, "I'm so glad she's not taking my order today. She scares me." Things started getting weirdly hostile. She would deliberately do tasks poorly, then turn around and claim she was the only person who knew how to do them. It was manipulative. But the real problem was that I was starting to feel unsafe around her. One night, we were closing the store. It was just me and Maggie. The doors were locked, the lights were dimmed. I was in the back office counting the safe. I heard a loud crash from the front. I ran out. "Everything okay?" Maggie was standing in the middle of the floor. The glass pitcher was shattered on the ground. She wasn't cleaning it up. She was just staring at the broken glass. When she heard me, she looked up. She was holding a box cutter that she used for opening shipment boxes. She wasn't threatening me with it directly, but she just kept clicking the blade in and out. "Just an accident," she said. Her voice was flat. She didn't move to get a broom. She just watched me. I grabbed the broom myself and swept it up, keeping my back to the wall the entire time so she couldn't get behind me. I didn't count the rest of the money that night. I just threw it in the safe and got out of there. Then came the Tuesday shift from hell. I was the supervisor on duty. It was busy. Maggie was making drinks, but she wasn't calling them out. Drinks were piling up. People were asking where their coffee was. I walked over to her. "Maggie, I need you to vocally confirm the orders so the customers hear their names. It's standard for everyone, including me." She stopped moving. She slowly set down a pitcher of milk. Maggie was a big girl. She had about 5 inches of height on me and probably outweighed me by 30 or 40 pounds. She turned to face me, and her face was bright red. Veins were popping out of her neck. She lunged. She didn't just step forward, she threw her entire body weight toward me. I stumbled back, my lower back hitting the counter hard. She got right in my face, so close I could feel the heat coming off her skin. "Back off," she screamed, spit flying from her mouth. "I'm serious, you don't want to see what I can do." I put my hands up, palms open. I didn't say a word. I just slid sideways along the counter until I was out of her reach. Then I walked straight to the back room and locked the door. I sat on a milk crate, trying to get my breathing to slow down. My legs felt like jelly. I reported it to the boss immediately. I thought, this is it. She threatened a supervisor. "She's done." The manager looked at me and sighed. "Look, Maggie is the best barista we have. She owns that morning shift. You just need to learn to listen to her." I blinked. "I'm her supervisor," I said. "Are you telling me I'm supposed to take orders from her?" She physically threatened me. "It's just easier if you let her have her way," the boss said. "Don't make this a big deal." I realized then that I was completely on my own. The manager wasn't going to help me. In fact, if something happened to me, she'd probably cover it up. I called my old boss, the one who promoted me. He told me to document everything. "Write it down," he said. "Dates, times, witnesses. Keep emotions out of it, just the facts. Then go to the district manager." So I did. For 2 weeks, I carried a small notebook. I wrote down every scream, every threat, every time she refused to work. I built a case. Finally, I told my manager I had documentation, and I needed a formal meeting with her and the district manager. My manager looked nervous. She said, "Okay, we obviously need to discuss this. Come in tomorrow at 2 p.m. We will hear you out." I didn't sleep that night. I sat up, rehearsing what I was going to say. I felt like I was finally going to get justice. I showed up at the store at 1:55 p.m. As I was walking to the back, the office door opened. Maggie walked out. She wasn't crying. She wasn't holding a termination slip. She was smiling. She looked like she just won a bet. She looked me right in the eyes, smirked, and walked past me to the floor. I walked into the office. The store manager and the district manager were sitting there. I pulled out my journal. "I have everything documented here," I said, placing it on the desk. The threats, the insubordination, the customer complaints. The district manager didn't even touch the book. He just raised his hand. "We aren't interested in hearing it," he said coldly. "We've heard enough today. We trust Maggie's side of the story. We don't think this is a good fit." I stood there. I looked at the journal, then at them. I realized nothing I said was going to matter. They had already decided. Maggie had gotten to them first with tears and lies, and they believed every single word. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just picked up my journal, turned around, and walked out. I never went back. I went home and applied to grad school programs the next day. I needed to get as far away from that industry as possible. I eventually moved towns, got a degree, and moved on with my life. But a few months ago, I was scrolling through Facebook. I saw a post from a mutual friend who still lived in that old town. It was a picture of Maggie. She was wearing a uniform. She was standing next to a patrol car, smiling that same smug smile, with a badge pinned to her chest. Maggie is a cop now. The person who screamed in my face, threatened to hurt me, and manipulated an entire management team is now walking around with a gun and the authority of the law. I worked with a project manager who thought he was everyone's boss. He was always spying on everyone and would report to your actual boss if you weren't working or away from your desk for more than 5 minutes. When he'd get up to leave his desk, He'd walk down every single aisle looking into every single cube to see who was there or not. He did this every single time. He had no reason to take this huge detour other than to be a jerk. I got so tired of it that I started keeping track on my whiteboard in my cube. I'd put a tick mark on it when he'd walk by. Every month, I put it into a spreadsheet on my phone. I kept track of this for 4 years. We used to laugh about it in our department. I would create various graphs from the data. I still have that spreadsheet 10 plus years later, too. It was a running joke in the office. We called him the warden. But the laughing stopped when we hired a new guy. His name was John. John was strange from the start. He was very quiet, didn't talk to anyone during lunch, and always sat with his back to the wall. He had only been with the company for about 3 weeks. John got up from his desk to take a phone call or use the bathroom. He was gone for maybe 15 minutes. It wasn't a long time. But the warden was on his patrol. He walked by John's empty desk, checked his watch, and stood there waiting. When John came back, the warden was right in his face. He started yelling loud enough for the whole floor to hear. He told John he was stealing company time and fired him on the spot. Usually, people just pack their stuff and leave, or maybe they argue a little bit. John didn't do that. He stood very still. He looked the warden right in the eyes. "You are making a mistake," John said. His voice was very low. The warden laughed and pointed at the door. "Get out before I call security." John leaned in close. I was sitting right next to them, so I heard every word. John said, "If you do this, I will kill you. I will kill you and your family." He didn't scream it. He said it like a fact. It was scary because he was so calm. The warden just rolled his eyes and mocked him, acting tough. John eventually grabbed his jacket and walked out of the building without looking back. The warden bragged about it for the rest of the day. He acted like a hero for trimming the fat. When the office closed that day, the warden got into his car and left. That was a Friday evening. On Monday morning, the warden wasn't there. This was weird because he never missed work. He was the type of guy who came in sick. By Tuesday, nobody had heard from him. Our boss tried calling his phone over and over, but it was switched off. He even drove to the warden's address, but the house was locked and the mail was piling up. That afternoon, they got the police involved. The police traced his route home. On the way to his house, there is a long stretch of road with woods on both sides. The police found his car there. It wasn't just parked on the side of the road, though. It was hidden behind some thick bushes, completely out of sight from the street. They searched the woods for a complete week. They brought in dogs, but they found nothing. The police checked the office records to find him, and that's when they realized something was wrong. John had been fired on the day the warden disappeared, but when the police went to the address on John's file, it was an empty lot. They checked his ID and social security number. It was all fake. John didn't exist. He wasn't found at his given address because he never lived there. We were all terrified. We realized we didn't actually know who had been sitting next to us the whole time. About 2 weeks later, I was at the market on a Saturday. I was pushing my cart down the aisle, looking for pasta sauce. I looked up, and I stopped breathing. I saw him. It was John. He was wearing a hat and sunglasses, but I knew it was him. He was buying canned food. My hands started sweating. I left my cart right there in the middle of the aisle and ran to the back of the store. I hid behind a stack of soda crates and pulled out my phone. I called our boss. My voice was shaking. I told him, "I see him. I see the guy who threatened the warden. He's at the supermarket on 5th Street. Our boss called the police immediately. I stayed hidden until I saw the blue lights flashing outside. The police were outside the store. They found John near the checkout line. He tried to run, but they tackled him and arrested him right there. After questioning him, the police finally got the truth. It was more disturbing than we imagined. On that Friday night, the warden was driving home. He was on that lonely stretch of road where there are no streetlights. He saw a tree trunk blocking his lane. It wasn't a stormy night. There was no wind. The tree had been placed there on purpose. When he stopped, he realized his tires were flat. He had driven over spikes. He got out of his car to check the damage. That's when he saw John. John stepped out of the darkness holding a gun. He forced the warden into the back seat. He drove the car off the road and hid it behind the bushes so no one would see it from the street. Then, John took him deep into the forest. He took him to a small cave that you couldn't see unless you were standing right in front of it. John had a friend with him. They kept the warden tied up in that cave for 2 weeks. The only reason the warden was still alive was because of an argument. John wanted revenge. He wanted to kill the warden for firing him and disrespecting him. But his friend wanted money. The friend wanted to call the warden's family and demand a ransom. They spent days arguing about it. John was planning to kill him that weekend because he was tired of waiting. Because I saw John at the market, the police were able to get the location of the cave. They raided the forest and found the warden. He was in bad shape, dehydrated and terrified, but he was alive. They arrested the friend at the site. The warden never came back to work. I heard he moved away and doesn't work in management anymore. Another night, another set of reasons to keep your doors locked. If you enjoy these stories, hit that subscribe button and join the circle. I'll see you in the next one if you are still awake.